Welcome. This is my tutorial on what is RxJS, what are observables and what are subscriptions. My name is Anton from Coding Rich, and in this video I want to explain very easily, very clearly and concise so that you understand what is RxJS, why do we need it, what are observables, what are subscriptions and why do we need them and how do we use them. I felt the need to do the video because programming is very abstract and there are just some topics which are very hard to grasp at the beginning, especially object-oriented programming and asynchronous programming. I saw back then when I learned this topic myself 3 years ago, I saw many videos and tutorials about this topic, but I found it very hard to follow and to understand. So I'm not a fast learner, I'm a slow learner. And so this video is for people who really want to understand this topic from the beginning. And I hope I can fulfill this job. So let's start. What is RxJS? RxJS is a concept, it's a library, and we can here go on tutorials point and check the definition. It's defined as a library for composing asynchronous and event-based programs by using observable sequences. It provides one core type, the observable, satellite types, observer, and so on. You see, I don't think this is really beginner-friendly. It is correct for sure, but it is very hard to understand, and I even find it hard to understand now that I know the topic. To make it simple, it is a modern library. It's an extension. If we write this full name out, it's reactive extensions for JavaScript, and we use it to deal with asynchronous programming. Now, in the past, people used promises. This is an older concept. It's basically the same but a different way on handling asynchronous things. And RxJS is just more modern and easier and has way more tools and possibilities to deal with asynchronous data. Now, I'm talking now about asynchronous, synchronous programming. What's the deal with it? Why can't the world just be simple and only use synchronous programming? Let me quickly demonstrate it to you. For example, we just go here on YouTube. This is my channel. And what is typical asynchronous programming? Asynchronous usually means we do something or we listen to something, we are waiting for something to happen, and once that happens, we do something else. Now in the example of YouTube, we click on a video. Welcome. Yes, welcome. The component loads, the website changes the view, and the video starts already. And if we would just use synchronous programming, it would look as follows. We click on the video, and it takes some time to build all this website, and that's not important. The video already starts before this here finishes loading, but it only starts after it finishes loading the video from the YouTube servers. We cannot play the video if we don't have the video available. Because if we use synchronous programming, we would click on the video, we would load the video files, and then we would play the video. How do we load the video files? We just make an HTTP request to the server, to the YouTube server, and request the video data. Cool, we can request that, but we don't know when it comes. So we request it, we play the video, but it cannot be played because the video data is not there yet. It might take a second or two. Now I have a fast network here. It plays immediately, but people who live in a village somewhere in Indonesia, they maybe need to wait 10 seconds before the video is there. So you cannot really use synchronous programming here. The asynchronous approach would be here too. We click on the video, we request the video file from the YouTube server, we wait until it's arrived, and then we play it. Now, I prepared a small example. Now this video is the first video on a series of videos about RxJS. I want to explain everything about it so you don't have to worry about it anymore. I made a small example here in Angular. We have one component. Here we have a button. If we click on a button, this text gets printed to the console and we execute get users from backend, which just does an HTTP request to a public API, so you can use the same code. You don't need an API key here. Now, if we click the button, all the entries will also load to the console. If we click the button, all the data will be also printed to the console. Let me demonstrate it. Inside on button click, and 2 seconds later we got the data. Now this was still pretty fast. We can make it even slower. We can throttle the network and make it slow 3G and repeat the same thing. Inside on button click gets printed and we wait for the result. Now the result arrived. And if you still don't see the problem with synchronous programming, let's say you want to do it synchronously. You click on the button, you request the data, and then you want to display the data in a table or do something else with it. It doesn't matter. How do you plan to wait for 10 seconds, which just took for the data to arrive? You cannot do a while loop or for loop or an if and else. In order to get data from the backend, we have to use the HTTP client. And if we check on the http.get method and we check what the response is or the return, it is an observable of HTTP response. And there's a reason why it's an observable and not just a number or an array or a string or something. Because, as you just saw, data needs time to travel across the network. It is not the same as assigning a value immediately, like here, let tests equals 10, test equals 10 now. There is no time to wait until the 10 is loaded from somewhere and it takes a few milliseconds or seconds to arrive. It is there immediately. And if you use values like that, values that you have already, then you can use synchronous programming with no problem. But if you deal with data, but in the most common use case, you send data somewhere or request data from somewhere, from a backend, from an API, then you always will come across asynchronous programming because it takes time until data arrives. Maybe for you it's just a few milliseconds and you don't recognize it, but for the computer, for the network, it's ages. So I hope that explains the point why we need asynchronous programming sometimes. Now we know that we need it sometimes. What are the building blocks of RxJS? What do we program with? First of all, let's talk about observables. Let's check the definition of an observable here. An observable is a function that creates an observer and attaches it to the source where values are expected, for example clicks, mouse events, from a DOM element or an HTTP request. This explanation also is a little bit dry, so let me explain it a little bit easier. Now back to YouTube, you see hundreds of observables here. For example here, this button, if I click it, the video will continue. It listens the whole time while this website is here on my screen. It listens and waits for my mouse click. And once I click on it, the video continues. The same thing here. There's an observable that waits for my mouse to click on it. Here, if I click on one of those random videos, the next video will appear. If I click the like or dislike button here, also same thing, it's an observer. The button will be liked or disliked. Or if I click here on the comments, the comment section will be bigger. It will load the other comments. And those are all observables. This is already asynchronous programming. And in the context of Angular, you use it already under the hood. Here with the button. We click on the button and data gets loaded. So we have a method on button click. And this is already asynchronous programming, because there's this time factor. Alright, but to make it even simpler, I like to demonstrate it with pictures. So imagine that you have two kingdoms, Kingdom A and Kingdom B. They are both 1 hour apart and they have a war with each other. And now Kingdom A wants to know what's going on with Kingdom B. And the agent needs to observe Kingdom B. And the spy has to observe Kingdom B. And that's all he does. He observes. Now the spy observes the Kingdom B for a few days, and the king of Kingdom A is surprised why he didn't receive any message from his spy. So he goes to the spy and he asks him, "Hey, why didn't you tell me anything?" "But king, you told me to observe. And that's all I do. I observe." And that's all an observable does. It observes data. It observes when the troops will march out of the kingdom to attack Kingdom A. So it observes some data. It waits for something to happen, for some data to get sent to him. And so back to the code. We say here get users from backend returns an observable of type any. And now of course I can do my subscribe here. I will explain it later and stuff, but I can create also an observable array, and that looks like this. Let result, and now I do a $, because in RxJS, to differentiate between normal variables and observables or subjects, which I will explain in a later lesson, we use this $. Now let me first finish the typing here. This get users from backend, and you see now result is of type observable. Of course it will have the same effect if I remove the $. If you want to have a better look at your code and to also appear more professionally, use the $. So what have we done here? You might think now that result equals the data from the backend, those lots of entries which I showed you earlier. And that's a misconception. That's the fallacy you walk into. Result is simply an observable. It's simply the spy of the data. It's nothing but an observer. It doesn't carry any data. So if we try to log it to the console, let me refresh the page, and we click get entries, boom, you get immediately here an observable. An observable has an operator and it has a source. Stuff which really doesn't tell us much. But we don't have the data from the server. Where is it? Because it is an observer. If we go back to the kingdom, you remember the king was surprised that his spy didn't tell him about the attack that will happen soon on his kingdom. He was very angry with him. But that was the king's own fault, because he didn't tell him to also deliver the news to him, to deliver the data. He didn't subscribe to it. So if you want the spy to tell you also what you want to know, then you have to subscribe to him. So the spy will only tell you the things when you tell him to tell you the things. And in the terms of RxJS with observables, you need a subscribe for that. So let me demonstrate it. We can now say result dot, and there we have for each pipe and subscribe. Pipe will be interesting for one of the next lessons, but now we need subscribe. Subscribe, so we have to open the brackets and we have to give a name to the data that we now expect to receive. We do not receive it yet, we just say we expect the data to receive. Because again, it can take several seconds, it can take minutes, it can take hours. Don't forget the buttons on the YouTube. It can take a whole year before someone decides to click on a like button. So we say, I just use res, short for result. It doesn't matter what you name it, just make it logical. We use a fat arrow, and then if we hover over it, it's res of type any, because the observable is of type any. Usually you should not use any, you should use something more meaningful like an array or something. So, and then we just print that variable to the console. And if we now press F5 and click the button again, boom, after 2 seconds we get the result from the public API and print it to the console. Here it is an array, and congrats, that was your first big steps in the world of RxJS. Take it some time to let it sink in. Just type the code yourself, and I'm sure you will understand after playing with it for a few hours. But we are not finished yet. With subscriptions we have to be careful, because subscriptions will never end if you don't tell them. Back to the kingdoms. We have the spy, and you tell the spy now to deliver you every news there is from Kingdom B. And now he tells you every minute he sends the pigeons to you with all the information, and every 5 minutes you get a new pigeon. You don't even know where the pigeons come from. And of course you're fed up with him. And now you have to tell him, of course, please stop updating me when the soldiers of Kingdom B leaves their kingdom. Because otherwise that poor spy would never stop sending us his pigeons, and then we would have a pigeon problem. But when do we want for the subscription to stop? That's in our control. We can say we only want the information once or twice or a certain amount of times, but in most use cases, and in this video I want to focus on the most basic one. In Angular we have the onDestroy, which is one of the lifecycle hooks, which gets triggered when the component gets destroyed. And here we also have several ways of ending the subscription. We cannot just say here now result dot unsubscribe or something, because result is a local variable and it is an observable. The observable is just an observable. You cannot unsubscribe it. You can only unsubscribe a subscription, like if you have Netflix. Add subscription to the observable here in the import statements, otherwise it will not work. We create now a new variable, subscriptions, where we hold all of our subscriptions, and we just say it's a new subscription with empty brackets. Now it has no subscriptions yet, so we can just add here one. We have result.subscribe, and we can also assign it to a variable just by saying let subscription equals to this subscription we have here. Oopsie. And we should also always add the $sign also with subscriptions, because it has to do with the RxJS. Now we can just say this subscriptions dot. Now we have the options add, close, remove, unsubscribe. And you may see now where this will go. We can just say here dot add our local subscription. And this is basically like an array of subscriptions. You can view it in your head, but it's of the type of subscription, and now we added this local subscription, and we can add as many as we want. But in the end, in the ng onDestroy, we really always have to unsubscribe them if we don't do it earlier already. I will show you this in the next lessons. So how do we do this? We just say this subscriptions. This is the variable which contains all the subscriptions, and now we can just say unsubscribe. Alright, and we save. Now if we go here, you will see absolutely no difference. And you will ask yourself, like, why did we do this? Why do we need this? This is very, very important. If we don't do this, then the subscription will always run. It will never end. And then the next time you open the component, your new subscription and the subscription from the last session And you can do this a few more times, 10 times, 100 times, and after a while you will have dozens, hundreds of subscriptions, and then your data will be all messy, and then your website will crash down. So you need this to remove all possible data leaks. Please always do this, because otherwise you will not be seen as professional and your website will crash after a while. That's our basic start with observables, RxJS and subscription. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you really understood what I talked about today. And if you have any questions left, please let me know in the comments. And stay tuned for the next videos. I'm excited for you to watch them. Alright, see you next time. Goodbye.